Hi, dear friend, did you know that you keep snacking on those foods you know are bad for you because you have formed an addiction to them? From that irresistible bag of chips to your favorite fast food burger, science has proved that ultra-processed foods are designed to keep you coming back for more. But what's really happening in your brain and body when you indulge in these convenience foods? Grab a seat, because we're about to uncover the hidden science behind how ultra-processed foods could be hijacking your hunger cues, hormones, and brain, making you crave them like never before. To start, let's define what we mean by addiction. Typically, addiction refers to a compulsive need to seek out and consume a substance despite negative consequences. It's not just about enjoying something, it's about craving it, losing control over how much you consume, and continuing to seek it out despite negative consequences. Addictive behaviors are driven by changes in the brain's reward system involving neurotransmitters like dopamine. When you engage in addictive behavior, your brain releases dopamine, making you feel good and reinforcing the behavior, creating a loop of craving and consumption. Watch this video here on what ultra-processed foods are and how to identify them for context. Briefly, UPFs are industrial formulations typically containing 5 or more ingredients, including substances not found in culinary preparations. These foods often contain artificial flavors, colors, preservatives, and other additives designed to enhance flavor, texture, and shelf life. Think of fast food, sugary drinks, packaged snacks, and instant noodles. They're convenient, yes, but they're also far removed from their natural states. In 2010, Johnson and Kenny reported their findings in Nature Neuroscience Journal. The researchers used an animal model to investigate the neurological mechanisms underlying compulsive eating and obesity. The study involved 3 groups of rats. One group was given extended access to a diet high in palatable, energy-dense foods, similar to human junk food, while the other group was maintained on a standard chow diet, and the other on normal chow, but had restricted access to food. The study aimed to examine whether prolonged exposure to a high-fat, high-sugar diet would lead to changes in the brain's reward circuitry, specifically focusing on the role of dopamine D2 receptors. The rats in the UPF group gained 23% more weight than those in the chow groups. Over time, the UPF rats began to exhibit compulsive eating behaviors, consuming the palatable foods even when they were paired with an aversive stimulus, e.g., mild electric shock, a behavior analogous to drug addiction in humans. The study also found that rats with extended access to the high-fat, high-sugar diet showed about a 20% reduction in dopamine D2 receptor availability in the brain's striatum, a region associated with reward and motivation. This reduction was similar to what is observed in the brains of drug-addicted individuals. The decreased dopamine receptor availability was linked to a diminished ability of the rats to experience pleasure from normal stimuli, leading them to overconsume the palatable food to achieve the same level of reward. This phenomenon is referred to as reward dysfunction and is a key feature of addiction. The study concluded that the consumption of ultra-processed energy-dense foods can lead to addiction-like changes in the brain's reward system, promoting compulsive eating behaviors similar to those observed in drug addiction. This finding suggests that the neurobiological mechanisms driving compulsive overeating and obesity may overlap with those that underlie substance abuse disorders. You may be thinking, wait, I am not a rat. And you would be wrong, because it's not just in animals, humans are affected too. In this 2012 study by Volkow et al., the researchers conducted a comprehensive review synthesizing findings from various neuroimaging studies to to explore the overlapping neural circuits involved in food and drug rewards in humans. The authors primarily used brain imaging techniques including positron emission tomography or PET scan and functional magnetic resonance imaging or fMRI to assess the activity and function of the brain's reward systems in both obese individuals and those addicted to drugs. The study reviewed and compared data from obese individuals characterized by a BMI above 30, participants with a history of substance use disorders, primarily focusing on addiction to drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, and alcohol, and healthy participants with normal BMI, and no history of drug addiction as a control group. The study found that both obese and drug-addicted individuals exhibited similar disruptions in dopamine signaling within the brain's reward pathways. Specifically, there is a notable decrease in dopamine D2 receptor availability in the striatum in both groups. This reduction is linked to a diminished ability to experience pleasure from natural rewards such as food, leading to compensatory overeating or drug use to achieve the desired reward effect. Neuroimaging data revealed that the brain regions involved in the reward circuit, such as the striatum, prefrontal cortex, and amygdala, are activated in similar ways by both highly palatable foods and addictive drugs. This overlap suggests that the same neural mechanisms that drive drug addiction may also contribute to the compulsive eating behaviors observed in obesity. Similar results were observed in a 2011 review by Gerhardt et al., published in the Current Drug Abuse Reviews journal. They showed that hyperpalatable foods high in sugar, fat, and salt can lead to behaviors typically associated with addiction, such as loss of control over consumption, continued use despite negative consequences, and withdrawal symptoms. Individuals often find themselves unable to resist these foods, leading to patterns of compulsive overeating. Let's move from the brain to the gut. Our bodies naturally regulate hunger and fullness through hormones like ghrelin, which signals hunger, and leptin, which signals satiety. But ultra-processed foods can throw this system out of balance. In a controlled study published in the Cell Metabolism journal, researchers took two groups of participants and fed one group a diet high in ultra-processed foods, while the other group ate minimally processed foods. Both groups were allowed to eat as much as they wanted. After just 2 weeks, the group consuming ultra-processed foods had higher levels of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and lower levels of leptin, the fullness hormone. Essentially, these participants felt hungrier and less satisfied, leading them to consume about 500 more calories per day than the group eating minimally processed foods. This study showed that ultra-processed foods don't just trick your brain into craving more. They also mess with your body's natural signals, making you want to eat more even when you've had enough. Companies like McDonald's and Burger King have perfected the art of creating highly palatable, ultra-processed foods that are hard to resist. You might remember the documentary Super Size Me, where filmmaker Morgan Spurlock ate only McDonald's meals for 30 days. The results were dramatic. He gained weight, his cholesterol levels skyrocketed, and he started to experience mood swings and cravings, especially when he wasn't eating McDonald's. He even described symptoms similar to withdrawal seen in people trying to quit smoking or drugs. But Spurlock isn't the only one who's put ultra-processed foods to the test. On YouTube, there are several more informal but eye-opening experiments. These examples help us visualize how ultra-processed foods affect our bodies and minds, reinforcing their addictive nature. The impact of ultra-processed foods isn't just limited to your brain and hunger cues. They also wreak havoc on your hormones, particularly insulin and blood sugar levels. Ultra-processed foods are often packed with refined carbs and sugars, which cause rapid spikes and crashes in blood sugar levels. Over time, this can lead to insulin resistance, a key factor in the development of type 2 diabetes. Watch this video to learn more about how ultra-processed foods are causing type 2 diabetes globally. The addiction to ultra-processed foods isn't just physical, it's psychological too. Emotional eating is a well-known phenomenon where people turn to food for comfort, often choosing ultra-processed options. The high sugar and fat content in these foods triggers a dopamine release, providing temporary relief from stress or negative emotions. This 2010 study by Continent et al. Investigates the relationships between emotional eating, depressive symptoms, and self-reported food consumption in a large Finnish population. The research aims to understand how emotional states, particularly depressive symptoms, influence eating behaviors and food choices. The study involved 3,714 adults aged 25 to 64 years. Participants were drawn from a national health survey, making the sample representative of the general adult population in Finland. The researchers assessed emotional eating using the 3-factor eating questionnaire, which measures the tendency to eat in response to emotional states, and depressive symptoms using the 13-item Beck Depression Inventory, a widely used tool to assess the severity of depressive symptoms. The study found that individuals who scored higher on the emotional eating scale were more likely to consume unhealthy foods such as sweets, fast foods, and sugary beverages. This association was particularly strong in women. The presence of depressive symptoms was positively associated with emotional eating. Participants with higher levels of depressive symptoms were more likely to report emotional eating behaviors, which in turn were linked to a higher intake of unhealthy foods. The study showed that while these foods provided a short-term mood boost, they reinforced the habit of turning to ultra-processed foods in times of emotional distress, creating a cycle of addiction. As you can clearly see from the evidence, there is no winning when it comes to these foods. The food environment isn't helping us stay healthy. Estimates suggest that the global food and beverage industry spends between $30 billion and $40 billion annually on research and development. This encompasses product development, food safety research, nutritional enhancements, flavor development, and sustainability initiatives. In the United States, major food companies like Nestle, PepsiCo, and Coca-Cola are among the top spenders on food research and development. Companies often spend between 1% to 3% of their annual revenue on R&D. For example, Nestle spends around $1.7 billion annually on R&D globally, and PepsiCo reported R&D expenses of approximately $700 million in recent years. While this innovation leads to more enjoyable and convenient foods, it's important to be aware that these investments are often aimed at making products more enticing, sometimes at the cost of added sugars, fats, and other ingredients that can contribute to unhealthy diets. Understanding the addictive nature of ultra-processed foods is the first step in breaking the cycle. But how can we reduce our reliance on these foods? Research suggests that mindful eating, focusing on whole, minimally processed foods and cooking at home can help. A study published in Public Health Nutrition found that people who regularly prepared meals at home consumed fewer ultra-processed foods and had healthier overall diets. The study emphasized that cooking at home allows for greater control over ingredients, reducing the likelihood of consuming high amounts of sugar, fat, and artificial additives found in ultra-processed foods. Take control of what you put in your body, for it is trapping you in an endless cycle of food addiction. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. As usual, references are in the description below. Would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, so feel free to share in the comments. Until next time, stay safe.